Welcome back to Capital Ideas, where we celebrate the innovators and innovations that enrich our lives and the capital markets that make it all happen. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm the co-founder of ICAN, the Investor Choice Advocates Network, and the co-host of Capital Ideas.
And I'm Dara Albright, co-host of Capital Ideas and proud board member of ICAN. And today we are very excited to have with us Alex Kim. So please welcome Alex to today's episode. Alex is a student at the University of Chicago, the Booth School of Business. And Alex has recently published an enlightening paper on how ChatGPT can help level the playing field for retail investors. So Alex, we're really excited to jump into this. And maybe you could start with telling us in the layperson's terms what your paper is all about.
All right. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me here. So our paper is just dealing with some important questions in the capital market. It's about corporate disclosures. Like, firms are communicating with investors, not only with numbers, but also with textual disclosures. And these textual disclosures are getting more complex and lengthy over time. For instance, if you take a look at JP Morgan's 10K report, which is annual report, it's like 300 pages long. And then it's full of difficult legal terms, like contracts and accounting terms. And, even educated people and accounting experts, like accounting researchers, when we take a look at the 10K reports, we have to invest a significant amount of time to go through the entire document. And I cannot even say that we are fully aware of actually what is happening inside the actual 10K report, because it's too lengthy and too complex. So there are like many studies here, like not my study, but previous studies have shown that textual disclosures do contain some information, and it is actually very helpful for investors if they can understand what's happening inside the disclosures. But as I said, the problem is the disclosures themselves are really complex, and investors are not capable of digesting the disclosures to the full extent. And now we have a very new and innovative technology, so-called large language models. In our paper, we used a very representative large language model developed by OpenAI, we commonly known as ChatGPT. And then this large language model is kind of specialized in learning and understanding complex documents, and they are capable of extracting some important information and then making the entire document really concise. So it is kind of very specialized in comprehending some textual information and then like transforming it into more understandable and concise format. And then we found this technology kind of very helpful, even in corporate disclosure setting. And then the idea was really simple. We passed the corporate disclosure through the ChatGPT API, and then we got a simplified version of corporate disclosures. Specifically, we used a section of annual report, which is management discussion and analysis, or MD&As, and also the conference call transcripts, which are like earnings calls that they're held quarterly by almost all firms in the United States. And these two textual disclosures are kind of very representative in terms of academic setting and also practitioner setting, because they are known to have like a lot of information inside them. And then we just passed through the documents to this large language model, and we got the simplified versions of the corporate textual disclosures. And what we find is kind of really interesting in that we see a reduction of 75% or 70% in terms of total length. So when we just pass through 300 page of documents, what we get is just like, 70 pages or 60 pages or even less. And, they are containing some important information. And then the next question was whether the simplified documents convey important information, or at least retrieve the important information from the original disclosures. And then what we did as some academic tests is just trying to see whether these simplified disclosures maintain or even improve or amplify the information contents of the original disclosures. And what we find is that these simplified disclosures are kind of very powerful in terms of their explanatory power to explain the stock market movements around the release of the information. So this is like the underpinning of the paper. So we find something called information bloat in our paper. And then the bloat term is kind of very simple. So as I told you, the documents, textual documents are kind of simplified substantially, like to 30% or 25% of the original length. And then we call this reduction in length as bloat. Because, you know, the simplified documents are as informative as the original documents, or even more informative than the original documents. But, you know, we can actually reduce the length of the corporate disclosures. You know, if they are like 10 pages or 9 pages long, you know, it's not that much, right? Especially, for instance, if we take a look at the conference call transcripts, they are like 7,000 words in total, but the simplified version is just like 2,000 words, which is like 10-minute read. And then we can actually grasp the important information and what's happening inside the firm, and then use it to explain the stock market movements in the stock market. And then we can actually better predict and explain the stock market movements. And then, you know, this bloat concept is the reduction in length. And then we also further show that this bloat is associated adverse capital market consequences, such as increase in information asymmetry and also the bid-ask spread. You know, these terms are kind of technical, but they are also associated with information asymmetry between the firms and also the investors. And if there is a large bloat, we also find that, you know, these firms are subject to higher degree of information asymmetry. So,
like, how do you measure information bloat?
So as I told you, like when we pass through the original document with GPT, you know, it is kind of like reduced in length when we ask it to summarize the original document. Say that the original document was 10-page long, and then the summarized document is 3-page long, and the disclosure bloat we measure is 70% because it's reduced by 70%. However, if the original document was like 20 pages long, and then if we get like 12 pages for the summarized document, and then the disclosure bloat is 40% because it's reduced by 40%. So this disclosure bloat is not like kind of stable over time. Even within a single firm, we observe significant variation in disclosure bloat, and across firms and over industry, of course, you know, there exists a significant heterogeneity or difference in terms of the magnitude of the disclosure bloat. And that this is kind of very interesting because even within a single firm, depending on what they are saying in the conference calls or MD&As, you know, this disclosure bloat varies over time and across firms.
I think that's an amazing concept, disclosure bloat, and I love the way that you use the large language model to quantify it. That seems very, very useful and insightful. One of the things at ICAN that we've criticized the SEC for is requiring disclosures beyond what is useful to investors, and it seems to us that the more disclosure bloat there is may tend to favor institutional investors who are capable of sorting through it and disfavor retail investors who may not be able to do that. Have you seen any evidence, Alex, of actual investors using large language models, ChatGPT or some other model to kind of sift through the earnings transcripts and the MD&A?
Right. So this is actually a very nice question. But as you know, this model, especially ChatGPT 3.5, has been public for like less than a year. And then like the API has been public for almost like 3-4 months or so. And then I believe that our study is one of the very first to actually use this model in large data set. And then, as you said, like I've never seen people actually using them in terms of like real investing. But I think what we propose in our study is kind of very applicable and easy to use even for retail investors. And what we are currently working on is actually we are preparing a website that summarizes like important topics of information, like of all like large firms, say S&P 500 firms, starting from financial conditions, products, competition, risks, political risks, or environmental risks. You know, there are like 10, 12 topics that investors are kind of generally interested in. We are processing the corporate documents with GPT, and then we're preparing the summarized documents for each topic, and we're planning to make them public free of charge to everybody. And then this website is currently being prepared, and we plan to launch it probably before the end of September. And then,
Wow.
yes. So, because, GPT, if you use it on the web page, it's free, but it's kind of very slow. But if you're using it via API, and if you're trying to process large amount of textual information, costs incurred, and then you have to pay for what you use. And then we are planning to just like process the documents because we have the technology and prompting, techniques. And then we actually know how to summarize the documents in human readable forms. And we're planning to make everything public to retail and also the institutional investors. Like, I just wanted to emphasize really one important thing, because, this reduction in length inevitably causes some loss of information.
Yeah, sure.
And then this is good and bad at the same time. I just want to say it in a more balanced manner. We know that these summarized documents are kind of more powerful in explaining the stock market reactions, but it's one dimension. The other dimension is that we are losing some information.
Sure.
And then, SEC is not just requiring firms to disclose many things for nothing. They actually do have some purpose. And then, we are summarizing the document, and actually the machine summarizing the document based on like the relative importance of each topic and the word embedding like in technical terms. But at the same time, we're losing some information. And what we really want investors to do is like, if they find something interesting or like attention grabbing from the summarized disclosure, they must actually go back to the original document and see what's actually happening there. So it's actually investors' responsibility to double check the summarized version and also the original version to be as accurate as possible, because sometimes large language models hallucinate.
Wow, that's incredibly helpful, and I wish you the best of luck in getting that up and off the ground. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us on today's episode, and thank you, Dara, as always. Everyone else, please tune back in to the next episode of Capital Ideas. And if you want more information about ICAN, you can go to www.icanlaw.org. Thanks, and we'll see you at the next episode.